Hello. Before Eric and I get digging into Daredevil and Batman, I want to direct your attention to a giveaway contest that we're holding on the Batman Book Club social media accounts on X and Instagram in a partnership with Rock'em Socks. Yes, we're giving away 5 free pairs on each platform to one lucky person on each platform with specially designed Batman socks. They're pretty great, so make sure to find yourself going to at the Batman BC on Twitter and Instagram and enter into the giveaway.
All it takes is one bad day.
You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This isn't a blood hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. I'm your host, Ryan Lauer. The Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcasts, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network, along with another long list of nerdy podcasts, all sorts of stuff that go there. Peter Frolics, you know the deal. I say it every single episode. batmanonfilm.com. Go there. Batman Book Club is also on Patreon. If you like what's going on with the show and you want to help support the show and keep the generators running in the Wayne Manor study, go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc. Now, thank you for listening to episode 229, Daredevil, Batman. Yes, we are right in the midst of Daredevil season, it seems, with the new show launching on Disney Plus after a very long wait for anybody that's been a fan of that series. Joining me to talk all things The Man Without Fear and The Dark Knight. He's a friend of the show. He's been on here a number of times. He's the host of the Fire Rises Batman podcast, and he's also the boss of Joe Fornerato. He is Eric Carter. Eric, welcome back to the Batman Book Club.
Hey, Ryan, thanks for having me. And I don't know about Joe's boss, but, I'll take it.
It's true. When he was on here last time, I mentioned it to him, and he was like, oh, yeah, Eric cracks that whip. So I'm just really curious, like how, because, whenever I talk to you, you're level-headed, you're jolly, you're smiling, but apparently that's not the scene behind the scenes over there on Fire Rises. So I'm not saying Joe doesn't deserve it.
Sometimes you gotta motivate. You know what I mean?
Motivate by abuse. And Joe
Something
was on
like
Zoom. I saw his face. He had a black eye, but that's neither here nor there. How are things with the Fire Rises podcast?
They're good. They're good. We're actually coming up. I was telling you before we started recording, we're coming up on episode 100.
Yeah.
So that's coming up in just a few episodes. So I'm not sure what we're doing with that yet, but I'm sure we'll do something special. We got to for 100 episodes. And we're also coming up on 4 years. So big things happening.
I think that it's the perfect time for you to revisit The Long Halloween.
As you do.
Obviously. Every episode, it's a consideration. Should I revisit The Long Halloween? Makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of anniversaries this year, Ryan. A lot of big ones coming up. So we'll see. Not sure what we have planned, but don't know if we're going to go the anniversary route or just kind of do something to commemorate how many episodes we've got in.
I'll mention, though, that your last episode was a bit of a book club on your podcast as well, revisiting The Man Who Laughs.
It was. Yeah. Yeah. So we'd like to do the comics once in a while, because, I mean, that's the basis of this show. So, because we wouldn't have Batman without comics.
That's right.
And I don't know, they're fun. I really love to talk comics. So once in a while, we got to break away from the movies and TV shows and dive into some actual source material.
So you like comics? Do you want to come on the Batman Book Club? You want to talk about a comic book?
I'd love to.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's do it. How about let's talk Daredevil, Batman, Eye for an Eye. How's that sound?
That sounds like a plan.
Wonderful. right. Well, that book, in a collaboration, which more on that here in a moment, between Marvel and DC, was released in 1997, written by D.G. Chichester, with art by Scott McDaniel. It's a little tricky here on the releases. Released physically, you can physically put your hands on a copy. They are not available legally, digitally. They are collected, or this one is collected in a trade paperback of some sort. I could not track down which one held this. That's also tricky to try and track down. And then obviously just last year, towards the end of last year, I believe, the DC versus Marvel Omnibus was released and did collect this. So, Eric, which version did you read for this episode?
So, you and I have discussed the omnibus quite a bit.
Ad nauseum, yes.
Ad nauseum. So I did pick up I got the omnibus for Christmas. My wife got me the DC versus Marvel omnibus, which the
Good
listeners
lady.
can't see, but you can see it.
Oh,
Right
I
here
can
over
see
my
it.
shoulder.
Jim Lee cover.
Yes. So I got that, and then as we started talking about doing this episode, I decided to pick up the floppy, the issue itself, or actually, I guess graphic novel. It's a small one.
Prestige format.
Yeah. So I've read both copies. I've read it out of the omnibus and out of the original release in the lead up to this episode.
Question of quality, color, print quality, paper quality of the two. Similar, the same?
They're pretty similar. The old one or the original release, it's that prestige format issue where it's kind of tough to open all the way, and
Yeah.
you don't want to
Yeah.
break that spine. So, some of the splash pages and things I would say are a lot easier to read in the omnibus than they are
Gotcha.
in this.
Okay. Fair enough. Where does that fall in the omnibus? Like the back third, halfway through?
Yeah, both of because there's two Daredevil and Batman stories.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them were towards the end of the agreement between Marvel and DC, so they're towards the rear of the omnibus.
Because are they positioned like in release order?
Yeah, they're
In the omnibus? Okay.
chronological.
Now, another question on this omnibus, because you and I haven't talked enough about it off mic, but now we're recording this.
That's right.
Is it just, and I was quote unquote, just as if it's lacking anything, because it's a thick book, but is it just story of the DC and Marvel, just story after story? Do they have write-ups in between or anything at all?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, they do have quite a few lead-ins to the stories. So there's interviews with Lynn
okay.
Wein and different creators.
Awesome.
And then a lot of the stories are just back to back to back. But then there's some that have a little more attention that they needed to put on them. So there's interviews in between here and there. And then there's several afterwards as well.
Oh, nice.
So there's a lot of information about just how the partnership came to be, which is really cool.
Yeah. See, I apologize if you told me that and I'd already forgotten, because now I'm like, damn it. I need to place an order on this, because that kind of stuff interests me too. Is like the stories on some things can be all right, but if like extras and write-ups that provide interviews and some history, if a lot of that is included, then I'm like, oh, I'm all in. Like I get fascinated by some of that stuff.
And a lot of the write-ups and interviews are not new. I mean, they've got older dates on them.
Yeah.
So I don't know when they were done or where they were collected, but I mean, they're in the omnibus now for you to read, but it'd be interesting to know like where these were initially published, because I have no idea.
All right. As for me, which version? I found it online. Moving on to the next question. When did you first read Daredevil, Batman, Eye for an Eye?
January.
Oh,
So
all
yeah,
right.
first time I read it was as part of the omnibus.
Yeah.
I was definitely not when these were coming out when this partnership happened in the 90s, or way back, I guess, with Superman, Spider-Man, way back before that. But towards the latter half year when it was the 90s and early 2000s, I wasn't consistently reading comic books at the time, or I
Yeah.
absolutely would have picked this up. But for the longest time, it's very hard to find.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I had never read it. I think the most of the mashups I had read was like Spider-Man, Batman, and I had read
Hmm.
those for your to follow along with your show when you did them on
Hmm.
the show. So yeah, this was the first time I had been able to read these this year.
I first read this story a little over 12 hours ago. So I
Nice.
just read it for this episode. As we're talking a little bit about this DC and Marvel stuff, and you just mentioned with my show, so I yes, there we go. Back episode 37, little Paul Herman, that Marvel zombie, he was on the show, and we talked the Batman Punisher crossovers, in which I
Mhm.
believe I liked one, didn't like one, and then I don't know which. I'm kind of scanning through now, and I should have looked beforehand, but I didn't know that I'd bring this up. But I know Nico Caruso was on an episode, and we talked Batman Spider-Man. Maybe I'll keep flipping through to see when that was, because this is great radio talk.
I remember both of these conversations. So,
Yeah, and what's funny is that I do. There we go. Batman Spider-Man crossovers, episode 93. If I'm both comic. Yeah, so we did both of them. So you and I are going a little different in that we're not doing both Batman and Daredevils, but we've got the other one by one of our favorites, Alan Grant, in our back pocket to
that's
probably
right.
revisit or yeah, visit here in the future. But I know the there's Paul knows much better than I. I honestly don't remember how much Nico knew with it, but the crossovers in late 70s between the two companies and then there in the back half of the 90s. And then I know the other Batman Daredevil one is 2000. So yeah, DC Marvel did them then, and then as we know too, because it just kind of came out that there's going to be more later this year. So that'll be interesting.
Which goes to show
Last,
you
Mhm.
how well those the not only the DC versus Marvel omnibus, but the amalgam
Yeah,
omnibus
that's
have
true. Yeah,
apparently done as well because
yeah.
they looked at that and they're like, "Hey, let's get the band back together."
We need money, and I think it's like, well, we're here now talking about, but I think it's a good idea. I can understand, especially Marvel being owned by Disney, that Disney's very much in like have their hands on all of their material,
Mhm.
hardcore. But when we've looked at these crossovers, like, there's two Punisher, there's two Spider-Man, there's two Daredevil. So one DC publishes, one Marvel publishes. The one, whichever company publishes, their hero's name goes first. And so I just feel
Mhm.
like if somebody's got their eyes on this and they're like, I want any of whoever Batman crosses over with, I want those. They're gonna buy a DC comic, they're gonna buy a Marvel comic. So it just kind of, I think it's good, but also I like how spaced out it is too. It's not like they're doing it every single year because then you'd cause burnout. I think with
Yeah.
these massive gaps and then how um now Marvel's winning in the two companies when it comes to, well, not maybe not, I was gonna say as far as like movies in a sense, as far as general audience and stuff, but as far as comics, I don't know. I think it's a good idea for the comic book genre, period, I think.
And not to mention, I mean, we have these amongst fandoms, we have these DC, you know,
Yeah, it's a
versus Marvel,
battle, it's a
DC's better.
fight.
But a lot of these creators that are with these companies, they've worked for both. There's
Yeah,
characters on both sides that they adore. So,
yeah,
they jump at the bit to get to do stuff like this. So,
yeah. I distinctly remember reading and stuff from Tim Sale and how he's like, I grew up a Marvel guy. I was a Marvel guy. Hey, what is Tim Sale gonna go down known for? Batman. Like,
Batman. Yeah.
or what has he gone down for? Known for as Batman for sure. All
Well,
right,
if you
last.
followed, I'm sorry.
No, no, no,
If you
you're good.
followed Dan Mora on social media, like, I
Yeah.
mean, you can see how excited he is about it. He just
Which,
posted a
if you
Batman Spider-Man
don't, you
photo the other day.
definitely need to. Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Dan Mora is a top tier artist right now, and yeah, I just saw I think just saw it, yeah, the other day. One that he posted, and I was like, man, that is good stuff. I'd expect nothing less from him, but it was a total
He's a
surprise. And
treasure.
yeah, looked great. Last question, and then we'll end the episode and go on with our day. Why Daredevil Batman eye for an eye?
So, and I've told you this,
Hmm.
Daredevil for me is like if there is a character that I love on the level of Batman that Marvel
Hmm.
has, it's Daredevil. Um, and not that I love him as much as Batman. He's just slightly behind.
Hmm.
But I mean, for me, he is the Marvel character that I attach to most. Um, love that character. I adore him. Big fan. I'm so excited for the TV series,
Hmm.
which is now started.
Hmm.
I mean, you can see the Daredevil figure over my shoulder here, Ryan.
Yes, sir.
So
Over
yeah,
your
I just
shoulder, on your t-shirt.
yeah. So for me, yeah, I just love Matt Murdock. I love the stories that they get into, and it makes sense, right? Because his world, Hell's Kitchen, the way that he goes about fighting crime, it's kind of similar to Batman, you know?
Hmm.
So it makes sense that I would love this character, and just seeing the two of them together and the excitement of having the omnibus and the TV show coming up, I was like, it's natural. I was like, hey, Daredevil Batman, let's do that.
Hmm. It made total sense when you told me, and you didn't say, hey, when the new season comes out, let's cover blah 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 or anything. It actually the timing did line up
Yeah.
for it, because I think I even had said to you like, hey, with planning and everything, you're up, and honestly, I think it's gonna be that first episode in March, right when the new series launches. So hooray! But I didn't know how far back your fandom for Daredevil went.
So it goes back to it was long after I had fallen in love with Batman.
Hmm.
Um, it goes back to probably the early to mid 2000s when I was kind of getting back into comic books. What around the time of Batman Begins.
Hmm.
Because I had started reading comics again after Batman Begins, and I was just looking for other stuff to dive into. So probably the 2006-ish era, and found some great books at a comic shop. You know, The Man Without Fear,
Yeah.
Born Again. So just reading stuff like that I found in trade at a comic book shop, and I was like, man, I love this guy. So
Yeah.
yeah, the better part of 20 years now, I've been a big
Hmm.
Daredevil fan.
Nice.
Um, yeah,
My with Marvel, it, I always said Spider-Man's like the only one that I could do okay with on as far as like knowledge for as much as reading.
hmm
Everything else has been so minimal and scattered. Fortunately, Daredevil, I did rectify some of that with, like you just said, Born Again, Man Without Fear. I got this, and I'm showing Eric Daredevil by Frank Miller Omnibus. This was like the
beautiful.
second one, which has The Man Without Fear and Born Again included in it. This is a really good one, but there's so much Daredevil for me to that's waiting for me when I'm ready, you know? Um, right now, if it's like if I'm not reading Batman, then I'm reading Ninja Turtles, which pretty caught up, but I want to do some like revisits of Ninja Turtle stuff. But I know definitely that there are two masterful runs by one Sir Ed Brubaker and then Chip Zdarsky on Daredevil that are waiting for me to
Yes,
crack into when the time is right.
yes. And if you, I don't know if I'll give him a little shout out. If you've heard of Sean O'Connell, who
Hmm.
just left Real Blend and Cinema Blend, and he's part of CBR now, their comic book
Hmm.
division. He just did reviews that popped up on Rotten Tomatoes for the new series, and he specifically called out you should read Devil's Reign from Chip Zdarsky
Okay,
for the because he's like that's the show takes a lot from it,
it's a
which
big
I told
influence.
you. Yeah,
Yeah,
I told you from the trailer. I was like, this feels like Zdarsky.
is. Is that towards beginning, middle, or end of Zdarsky's run?
Middle of the back half. It's in the second Zdarsky omnibus.
Gotcha. Would that be one I should just start, not just start with that and then go back, or just start
That's
Zdarsky's first?
that's tough. Someone was asking me the exact same question like two
Yeah.
days ago, and it's hard to say. I don't know if it would be
I'm holding
really
you
hard to jump
accountable for
in.
everything.
Yeah, I know, and that's it's you're putting a lot of weight on my shoulders here, right? I think you could understand it, but
Yeah.
I definitely think it would be better if you had the full Zdarsky story
Okay.
under
The
your belt.
whole picture, the whole context. Okay.
Hmm.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I'm sick and tired of talking Marvel. I want to talk Batman and DC, okay? Because I'm a
Let's do it.
DC head. Marvel can go to hell. I don't care. All
Kick
right. So
rocks.
this book here, because I'm such a non-Marvel reader, uh DG Chichester, Dan is his name. He had a Daredevil run from 1991 to 95, I believe.
Hmm.
And so he became, I don't know if I'd say even like a front runner. I looked up some stuff online. Splash Pages Comic Book Club on YouTube did an interview with him just back in 2023, in which Chichester had called the assignment intimidating because at that point he'd never worked on Batman, and also he was going to be collaborating with, the overseer at the time of uh, all things Batman, DC, etc. The late great Denny O'Neil. But
Hmm.
he definitely something that he was really proud of was linking Matt Murdock and Harvey Dent, which you and I will get into here in a second. Something that also that I found that was fun was way back in the day, he did an interview with manwithoutfear.com. And one of the questions that was asked to him, so I think this said it was 1998 when this interview happened. And the question was asked, how difficult was it to make Daredevil Batman happen? And he said it was a pretty straightforward proposition, accepting Marvel's grueling contract process. We got going on the story with Batman editor Denny O'Neil. Almost immediately, things got off track when both Lee Weeks and I asked to see a contract or at least a letter of commitment from Marvel regarding the conditions of payment and such. This stretched on well over a year, and when we finally heard back, uh, Marvel pulled back on their promises, which ultimately drove Lee off the project. So think about that, Eric Carter. At one point, Lee Weeks was attached to this instead of Scott McDaniel. While this it was disappointing, it did derail my own train of thought considerably. It finally led to something like a commitment. The one positive thing to come out of it was bringing Scott McDaniel on board as artist, which I couldn't have been happier with. And he did comment, in a sense, that there it was, while with weeks in development, it was a different story. So what we have here wasn't the original seed of the story for this event, and it wasn't the original artist attached to this event. So there's a an alternate universe where Daredevil Batman illustrated by Lee Weeks, and who knows what happened? Who knows? Never know. Maybe I could ask him someday. He is on Chichester is on Twitter.
He
X.
is. Um, and if I could say,
You can.
this is nothing against Mr. McDaniel, personally, I would have preferred Lee Weeks' art,
Gotcha.
if I'm honest. So that's one of the things, and we'll just go ahead and get this out of the way. The
Hmm.
art in this book is fine, but it's definitely not my preference for either of the characters. Um, and yeah, I Lee Weeks has some beautiful Daredevil art. So I don't know if you've ever seen any of it, but it's great art, and I think he would have killed this book.
I don't know that I have, but I've obviously seen new and old art of Lee Weeks. And yeah, really interesting of how that would look. I do like McDaniel's art, period. I
Okay.
do. I also do think I almost feel like the animated series The Batman, you could almost say is almost heavily inspired by McDaniel's art. as
Mm,
far as the look of the characters, like the shapes of the characters and stuff, and like where almost like the angles to define muscles and in the in all of that. It seems like that. So I really like that animated series, but there's such a distinction between I think Batman the animated series is just like a step above, and I kind of
yes,
feel I like McDaniel's, and it's not meant to be like a criticism because I just said I like it. He can hang around like the B plus area, and I feel
sure.
like Weeks just has constant moments of A plus, you know. So I think that's like the difference for me. And
Yeah,
in
and
some,
as I said, I like the art here, but I'm just
yes,
not in love with it, I
correct.
think.
So I just broke it down, which made it sound. It's one of those things of like, man, what am I? Did that just sound awful? Scott McDaniel, right? He runs into you on the street and he's like, "Hey, Ryan, you son of a bitch. Why don't you try to draw something? I've heard you say that your stick figures even suck." And I'm like, "That's true. They do. I'm sorry, Scott." But it's like, but honestly, that's kind of like that's just how I feel when looking at it. I've paid my money buying his comics, so I have an opinion, and it's not a bad one. Um,
There you go.
I am curious on what that. I will Google and see what Lee Week's Daredevil art looks like. So I guess sticking to the art for this, I'm the story overall, the book, it took me a little while to get going with it. And I almost think
Yeah.
I had to it took me a while on page one that opens with Batman to kind of even see, to make out what's happening. Like, what am I really, okay, it's very obvious that there's a body keeled over, and that's Batman. And then these very widescreen panels below it is like, huh? And I don't. And one thing that McDaniel does do really well is there's shadow. He does good shadow. Good. It's a
Hmm.
this is a nighttime comic book for Batman and Daredevil. I think that's great. But yeah, that's so. I think that's a little bit where the art can come up just a little short for me is making out clearly what are we seeing here.
Yeah, and I think that's also partly to do with the story that Chichester is giving here,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, there's a lot of on the Wayne industry side of this. There's a lot
Yes.
of techno babble in the
Yeah.
book, and then when you're trying to pair that with the art, that's not like, especially on like that first page, like you were saying, that's not super clear what you're looking at. It,
Mm-hmm.
it can be hard to make heads or tails. The overall story, once you get into it, is a lot easier to discern than the minute details like that.
Yeah. And I think as a whole, I like the story. Uh, there are moments that I really like.
Hmm.
So a couple of like standout things. But yeah, that's kind of where I just landed. And then I revisited it before you and I started recording, just kind of just flying through it. I didn't reread the whole thing, but I wanted to, a few parts that were a little mucky for me, I wanted to flip through again and give a second glance. The opening with Batman holds firm how it was the first time reading it. The story, it's tricky because it is 48 pages. How do you get Batman and Daredevil? One lives in a fake city, one lives in a real city. How do you get them together? That makes
Hmm.
sense. I feel that's kind of it's rushed, and it's just yeah, obviously. Because there's an incident at Wayne Industries. It led me to the sewers of New York City. We should work together.
Yeah,
Huh, that's convenient.
yeah.
Like,
So there very much is and I got this very quickly reading through the DC versus Marvel omnibus. There's
mhm,
a formula to these
yeah,
stories. They have to find some way to get the two characters together. The two characters conflict, and then they team up
yeah,
to take down the bad guys in the story. One Marvel, one DC on the
hmm
villainous and the hero side. So there is a formula to it. I do appreciate that Chichester tried to do something a little different with this one.
Okay.
Because he tied he tied Matt Murdock and Harvey Dent together.
Yeah.
They have a history. That didn't happen in the previous books. He also, you know, he gave some more complex story reason as to why the two heroes came together in the story.
Hmm.
Now, whether he succeeded at that, is debatable. But in the past stories, it was like, okay, Super or Clark Kent is a journalist. Spider-Man, Peter Parker is a photographer. They're at this convention, in whichever in New York or Metropolis at the
Yeah.
same time, and that's just coincidentally everything's happening while those two characters are in the same city.
Yeah.
So I do give them credit for trying to find a way to more, I guess, organically make
Hmm.
it happen, but at the same time, like you just said, I mean, going from Gotham, where Batman's investigating this tech crime, to the sewers of New York, I don't feel like you get a super good explanation of how he went from A to B, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because Batman does say this, and he quickly says because the scene is so evenly split that it's obvious that it's Two-Face. I can jump
Hmm.
on board and just be like, sure, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Moves into, and that's on a Sunday night. 5 days later, Friday, New York, New York, at WFET, where Amy Springer is giving us the news. Tech crimes. Does a little exposition. Then we're underground, and Daredevil is investigating a murder. Cut to hunting for justice. Another hunter tracks the underground cold, scanning for the particular heat of a human body. It's Batman in those same sewers. It just is. And I'm
Just
like,
is.
and I thought that I looked at it again this morning because I was like, did I miss something? Nope. He's just there because obviously Two-Face killing people led him to telephone workers underground in New York. I
Yep.
like scratch my brain a little bit at that one. I wouldn't want to challenge the writer and be like, because it's a small detail and it is like we have 48 pages. Every panel is important. Like we're limited. So you
Yeah.
got to get the story going. But that stood out to me a little bit of, okay, we got to get them together. And okay, I guess they're together. That's fine. I really do dig how it's even worded of let's see. It catches so about Daredevil, it catches the Batman's eye, raising suspicion, dropping the detective into position to ask tough questions in as hard-hitting a manner as necessary. No external sensation warns Daredevil he's being stalked. The Dark Knight is that good.
Yeah. I love that
I love
part.
it.
So you,
I love it
yeah.
because this is a Marvel book, so their hero needs to be propped up, and they're even saying like, "Nah, Batman's that good, man."
Yeah, but at the same time, in the very next sequence here, you've got you've got Daredevil getting on that equal footing when
Hmm.
Batman throws the batarangs and Daredevil catches him.
Yeah.
So they and that's part of the agreement with Marvel and DC. Like they can't have one character looking better than the other, clearly.
Hmm.
But at the same time, they do elevate and make sure that they highlight the attributes of each of these characters. And
Hmm.
having Batman be able to sneak up on Daredevil, that's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah. The breakdown of this is something I want to break down with you. The because I don't know what so, one thing that's cool that McDaniel does do is like the radar. I just think, what's clear to me, which is really funny, is the Affleck Daredevil movie of what he
Mhm.
sees. And I know that that's dated now and everything too, but like I haven't watched the movie in a long time, but actually I've always kind of liked that movie. Whatever. But McDaniel does a version of that for Daredevil, and I'm not obviously such a massive reader to know if that is the norm. It's always included, but I do like almost like his radar, Daredevil's radar of his senses, and how yes, like kind of as you mentioned, of though he Batman is that good, he does pick up on it quick, and we get a cool radar illustrated illustration. But then when Batman lunges at Daredevil, I don't know what the hell all this white stuff that's surrounding Daredevil is.
Yeah,
I
that's a
was,
good question.
I don't know. And I just sat there and I was like, I know I'm not, I really am not trying to nitpick anything, but it is when it's hard to get me up and moving on a story and I kind of keep getting derailed, I'm like, what's derailing me?
The only
And
thing, because it looks like he has crashed through something, so maybe it's dust flying.
but he was just behind him. Like he just landed
Yeah,
behind him. So he's stalking, and it even says stalking. Like he's stalking him, and then it seems he goes to lunge at him, and then there is Churkatum.
yeah,
Maybe Churkatum just launches a bunch of smoke and dust. I don't know. Churkatum.
yeah.
It and okay. So I don't exactly know. I'm like, but remove those things, and that's a cool image, I think.
Yeah.
Batman lunging at Daredevil. I just don't know what these things are that are turkatuming around him. And they have, which is, it sounds like as you're saying, I can't remember the ones that I've read. Part of the formula here, hero fighting hero, hero battling
Yep.
hero, clashing.
Hmm.
Gotta have it. Waste no time. We're on like page 8 or 7 or yeah, 7 or 8. And this is already happening. All right. We're up and moving. That's fine. Daredevil catches the batarangs. That's cool. I'd expect Daredevil to catch the batarangs. Um,
Well, and how cool is the image of him catching the batarangs and them looking
yeah,
like extended devil horns?
yeah, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Do you think that was just a coincidence?
No, I think they
Oh,
meant
okay.
to do that.
Absolutely not. They knew what they were doing. And it's a good battle. And then we're both sewer diving for the same reason. Am I right? Thieves and murderers. Nothing to say to that. We could go after the killers together, or we can just kill each other. Guess where part of me is hoping you'll place your bet. All that's Daredevil. All that's like it's wrapped up quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean
Okay.
there's no conversation back.
Yeah.
Um which I know Batman is stoic, but I feel like he would at least say, "Yeah, yeah, I'm after after some
Well, at
murderers
this
too."
point, where are the Batman is seeing? I mean, he sees Daredevil next to the blood.
Hmm.
Uh, what what has happened to get Daredevil to reach that conclusion?
I'll be honest with you.
I don't know.
Um, I think what happened, like I said, because they were because the next page is them going into a flashback of the neural net stuff with
Yeah.
Wayne Enterprises. Again, I think they were trying to do something very different,
Hmm.
and they only had 48 pages, like you said. So
Yeah.
they were trying to do a little more than your normal DC Marvel mashup, but the page limitations caused them to kind of
Yeah.
okay, well, we can either expand this or we can cut out we can either expand the explanation of what's happening between these two characters or we can cut out our flashback sequences. And I think and I can't say this with 100% certainty, but it feels like they decided to keep the flashback sequences and cut
Yeah.
down a little on the exchange.
Which I don't. I'm a little indifferent to the flashback sequence because it adds something extra. And it's
Mhm.
like, okay, but to cut that out at the expense of maybe a little more smoother Batman and Daredevil meeting up, their conclusion to their fight, would I rather that? I'm like, I don't know. Because I don't think that the flashback stuff, um, I don't think that halts the story or derails it either, though.
I think the flashback of Matt Murdock and Harvey Dent
Hmm.
is more crucial to the story than the Wayne Tech flashbacks.
I agree.
Because all you need to know from the Wayne Tech part is they've developed this microchip
Hmm.
that affects the brain. It tries to replicate the brain.
Affects
That's
the
all you
brain.
really need to know.
And then they find out that it actually the host, so the real living thing, does not survive the process,
Correct.
the deal.
Hmm.
That comes into play later. Two different flashbacks, though. I don't know. Could maybe have done it in one.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you could have either cut it down to one, or I mean, I think you even could have done some exposition
Yeah.
from a Wayne Tech employee or something like that, and you could have really cut that out and expanded on the conversations between Daredevil and Batman.
Yeah, I agree. And we are inching closer to that Harvey Dent, Matt Murdock flashback. But let's talk about Harvey Dent. Because then at Thumb Jockey Arcade Sales and Service in Brooklyn, a really, I think this is a really good dialogue scene for Two-Face. Like,
Hmm.
I really dug the whole point of why people are fascinated by arcades and adding an extra quarter. I'm not going to try and play old man here, but back in the day to play video games at arcades, you had to insert quarters and go somewhere and play them and then just keep hoping my quarter will last.
Yes.
But his whole idea behind the coin, and obviously we know the importance of a coin with a character like Two-Face. And I also think it's great. Yes, you know by the cover of this, which has Two-Face on it, and Batman has already mentioned Two-Face once, but it's like as soon as it takes us to this place and you just see a coin and then multiple coins and you're just instantly like, here we go. This is kind of comic book fun. We've got Two-Face here with a bunch of coins, and then he's given this really great monologue about the emphasis on a coin for arcades at their location. I really dig that.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun. And I mean, it's a terrifying sequence too, with
Yeah,
this
that poor
with the
guy.
poor hostage that's here, and is leading into the reveal of Mr. Hyde being
Hmm.
paired with Two Face. But yeah, I mean, the whole conversation about the coins and their importance, especially as someone who grew up in the '90s,
Hmm.
like you said. I mean, it's
Yeah.
fun, and they do the duality because the
Hmm.
hostage here has twin daughters,
Yeah.
and there's a creepy focus on that. So
Although interesting because the twin daughters' names, Jenny and Allie, and usually twins always have same first letter.
yeah, like the alliteration thing.
So you know what? I'm not buying into this story. This just does not work for me. This doesn't
You,
work.
so you can tell Stan Lee did not have a hand in this
Yeah,
story specifically.
exactly. You'd be like, excuse me, we've really botched the names here. So the Hyde guy, obviously, so fitting that that's who Two-Face would partner up with, just
Mhm.
on the name alone. However, I have absolutely no history or knowledge of this character.
Okay. So I have little,
Hmm.
but I mean a little more than you,
Hmm.
it appears. So he
No, you definitely have more than me, just by that alone.
so Hyde in Marvel is I would say he's honestly like the Mad Hatter
Okay.
in DC. So he was a character that was obsessed with the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde,
Hmm.
much like the Mad Hatter was obsessed with Alice in Wonderland.
Nice.
And so he participated in some experiments that turned him into sort of a Hulk type
Hmm.
creature, and he calls him Mr. Hyde. The only difference is here it's pretty much like he doesn't revert. Mr. Hyde is pretty much taken over.
All right. Fair
There's
enough.
your quick synopsis.
There's your 1 minute history, 1 minute Marvel history. So to it makes sense on that note. I don't it's like it's already I don't think in anywhere in here do we get any kind of knowledge, in-depth look of how the two got paired up, other than the name Hyde probably was attractive to Two-Face, and he's a big like Hulk guy, and Two-Face is going to use him. Now it's all connected to the pills for the neuro thing in the brain. He's going to use Hyde as the subject for it, but outside of that, we don't have a when they first met up, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't get the which happens a lot with these crossovers. Like you
Yeah,
just get
they
into the
just are.
story and the two villains are they're already together.
Yeah. Which I think it's fair to point out, I don't care all that much
No.
either. It's like, okay, they're two villains. That's what
Especially
happens.
because
Moving on.
in these early crossovers, and I don't know how they'll handle the new ones, but it's not like they weren't treating these as separate worlds. They were
Yeah.
treating these as the same Earth. There's nothing that happened to bring these two universes together. It's just in these stories, New York appears or exists, Gotham exists. They're
Uh,
part of the same
I
world.
mean, even as like the opening page even says this is an Elseworld story.
Hmm.
Okay. Where DC and Marvel coexist. Give us that Elseworlds movie, James Gunn. I dare you. People would lose their freaking minds.
Yes.
It's effective when you do have brutal a-hole villains, and how this guy who seems innocent and we just see in his wallet he has twin daughters and cute girls, maybe I'll pay him a visit sometime, and Two-Face shoots and kills the dude. It's like that's pretty brutal. All right.
There's a
And
lot
then
of
we
vaguely brutal stuff in this story.
yeah, which is like I don't know, it's effective for
Mhm.
me. You know, it's like okay, I'm not like oh the Two-Face he's being so funny and silly. It's like oh no, he's a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's bad. Uh, which leans us into, and then like we get a shot of Hyde becoming addicted to these pills, which have a link to the neuron to the brain waves thing. Yeah, that's see, and that's where it's just so I get it, but I can't get specific with it because I'm like the neurotransmitter, and they're stealing tech for it somehow because Two Face is just gonna sell it for money. Okay, yeah, all right, moving on. But takes us to the great flashback. I think so. As I mentioned the scene and the dialogue of what Two Face just had with the arcade stuff as a
Hmm.
highlight. I think the flashback is a highlight. And as
Yes.
Chichester too said that how he was like proud of how he linked Matt Murdock and Harvey Dent because it's right there. Like they're both lawyers. Now, it's
Hmm.
easy for anybody to be like, "Oh yeah, obviously it's right there because we're seeing it. It's there and we see the link." But uh for him, I'm sure it was like such I don't know. You have a mass uh amount of villains in Batman's world to pick from. I don't know that it would have ever felt extremely obvious of like, hey, this is presented to you. Awesome. Which villain? Two-Face, because he was a lawyer and Matt Murdock's a lawyer and there's something there. I don't know that it'd be that immediate, you know? But I think it works really well. And I think the only part I had to revisit a little bit was to see where Murdock and Dent clashed. I had to read their dialogue over a couple times to understand like wait, what are you getting at where your views of the law are clashing? Because you guys are on the same side, but you have different opinions.
It's a spirit of the law versus letter of the law conversation. Like one is hard and fast, the law is the law. One is the law is variable, and
Hmm.
there's gray areas. I think that's the argument. But I think honestly, more than them losing the debate and one winning the debate, the best, most well written part of this flashback is that they're friends, they're buddies, they're at this debate thing.
Hmm.
But as they're going out, there's this statue
Lady
of the
Justice.
Lady Justice. The most interesting part to me, and it's like foreshadowing, and it's done so well, is that they are kids in this
Hmm.
instance. Harvey Dent jumps on the scales of the Lady Justice and tips the statue over, and Matt Murdock is there to balance them.
Yeah.
That that's just it's a small little thing, but it's so clever.
Visually, like metaphorically, all that poetically, another Lee,
Yeah,
not Lee Weeks,
not,
is
not, not.
like, yeah, it's it's cool. It's a cool point without saying because Harvey Dent is going to lean one way, they need Matt Murdock here to lean the other way, so it will be balanced. Yay, law. No,
Yeah.
it's just a cool and I think a clever way to get the point across. So I'm totally
Yes.
with you on, yeah, that's cool. I dig that. That's good stuff. And it does come into play in Daredevil's discussion with Batman, and then ultimately at the end with Two-Face, which we'll get to. I think a highlight image, which surprises me in a way that this isn't like the cover, is the next page of Batman and Daredevil leaping side by side.
Off the rooftop. Yeah.
Good stuff, McDaniel.
Yeah, you've got Batman kind of
Bravo.
striking sort of a Frank Miller-esque
Yep,
pose there. Yeah,
exactly.
it's good stuff.
Um, and then like I know that there's dialogue here that's did he say at this point at some point he's mentioned well, oh no, sorry. Let's backtrack for just a second. That Batman mentions, let's say you're visually impaired, and I like the reaction of Daredevil of how quickly Batman has deduced his limitations.
Mm.
You favor your other modes of sensory input, a subtle inclination of your head when there's a sound, an extremely slight flaring of your nostrils, probably indicating olfactory acuteness. You're practiced or possess sensory enhancements, making your powers of observation markedly proficient. Well done, Batman.
Yeah. Yeah, this his detective skills here kind of remind me of the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies
Mm-hmm.
where he's just picking up on minute details and showing you everything in real time, like telling you why this is this and that's that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
and just
Good call.
and Batman just picking up on those things and say, okay, yeah, you're blind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just yeah, it's Batman.
And I dig that because it doesn't, I just feel like I know that this is so crucial that no, Marvel doesn't want their property Daredevil to be, especially in their own book, put down and less superior, and vice versa for DC and Batman. And I think this is Batman being true to character here. And he's not putting down, it's just, I figured you out already. You're limited in visuals. And I think that's great. And Daredevil, if you won't tell me why with Two-Face, then how about what you've got planned? I remember Harvey Dent from Better Times. And we get, it's one panel, well, one big panel with two small ones, really quick, Maroni, acid, blah, blah, blah. Daredevil says Harvey Dent is still there. His deformity, it's a mask like yours or mine. Only what he wears brings out something different. And then Batman, speak for yourself. This isn't the mask I wear. Daredevil, I think you need to consider the man inside the monster. Batman, I'll be sure to bring that up with the victims' families. Daredevil, I'm not advocating leniency. I'm just saying justice needs to at least offer redemption. Batman, I'm sure you're very good at whatever it is you do in this city, Daredevil. That said, sit this one out. Interesting exchange.
Yeah, and I think very good reading there, but you have to put a little more chill on that one bubble because it's clearly got the chill to it. The
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I'll be
yeah.
sure to bring that up to the victims' families. Yeah.
That's true. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Nail it? Okay. I think I got it. Got it there. But
But
it's,
yeah,
go ahead.
and again, this is even going back to the debate
Mm-hmm.
that you see in the flashback because their sense of justice, one hero to another. Um, Daredevil's very much looking at things through a lens of legalese.
Yeah.
There's the spirit of the law. There's shades of gray. Just because someone does something evil doesn't mean they're inherently evil. And Batman's no.
Yeah.
Explain that to their families, blah, that kind of thing.
I think there are moments in this, and it's funny because you just said chill, of that I think Chichester does write Batman a little cold.
He does.
More so, not extreme, but just maybe a little leaning more than what I feel is normal.
And again, he had
Just a
never written Batman
little,
before.
just a
So,
little. Exactly. So looking at it so intently, it's like usually if I'm just reading something for the first time, something stands out to me, then I'm like, okay, make note of that. And that's one thing of making note. Not do I think it's bad, not do I think it's extremely against character. Chichester has not ruined my childhood. I just think, okay, there's a couple small moments that I feel like, oh, this is a little more cold than I experience with Batman and even the serious stories and everything. But I
mhm.
think it's interesting that marks it almost from the get-go more clear to me Batman and Daredevil's clashing than Matt Murdock's and Harvey Dent's. I eventually got there after rereading Harvey
Mhm.
and Matt's, but this was like first read through was, oh, that's a good nugget of that's where they're both on the same side and want justice, but they both have a different meaning of justice right now. And as we know,
Mhm.
Batman's not a kill because he's a murderer. That's not Batman. But Batman, it can come off of like, I need to do whatever I need to do to take down Two-Face and throw him in Arkham. Whereas Daredevil is, yes, we need to stop him, but we need Harvey's internal battle to win and Harvey to come out on the other side. It's not just lock
Yes.
up. It's like lock up and fix.
Yep.
I like that. I think it's really good. And I think Batman's that way a lot too in a lot of stories. And not so much here, but like by him not being so much here helps this story. So I have no issue with it whatsoever.
Yeah, because it fits into the you had to have one of these characters lean into the more legal aspect. And
Yeah.
when you have one of the characters literally being a lawyer, then Batman doesn't make as much sense to do it here. So
A duo can't have they are the exact same. I
yeah.
mean, freaking why do comedy teams work? Because one's a straight man, one's kind of a wild and crazy. That's just how that's the balance, that how it works. And so here too, outside of their color, outside of Batman's in shadow all the time, Daredevil's bright and red. Uh, Outside of DC and Marvel, it's like, how do we keep their dynamic interesting? And that's just like, there's the nugget. So we're almost halfway through the story, and I'm like, this is a really, oh, this is a good piece right here. Let's see what Chichester does with it the rest of the story,
Mhm.
which obviously means enter the Batmobile. Quick scene.
Yeah.
And in that interview online from like 2 years ago, the video interview, it's on YouTube. Maybe I'll put a link of it somewhere in the when I post this episode. Because it's quick, it's like a 5 minute thing, and they quickly touch on. I'm curious on, let's see, Daredevil by his sensory. He says, "Where are you drove that from Gotham City?" And Batman says, "On the open road. I have more subtle means of moving what I want to where I want it. Redeem your dignity. Stop asking stupid questions." All right, well, there's Batman being a little bit of a dick, but
Just a little.
just a little bit. There is something there that Chichester said with that Denny in working with Denny O'Neil, that how it is here is not how Chichester initially wrote it. And Denny, being the master of Batman, corrected, edited, and discussed with them how to rework on, because Batman and the Batmobile would not something something something. And I can't remember what he said about it, but it was just like, Denny O'Neil, the master. He knows. How would you argue with that? And of course, Chichester in that seems like a very nice guy and wasn't like, I pushed back at Denny O'Neil. You don't know shit. He didn't say any of that. He was like, yeah, so it was good. He was right and something. So I'm curious of like, well, it's one panel, two panels, whatever. What'd you originally have there? I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. Because I would be curious to know what he originally had.
Yeah. Maybe it's two
But
words were different and changed. I don't know.
as to your point, I mean, if you've never written Batman before and Denny
Yeah.
O'Neil is giving you notes, Yeah, you probably
Sir,
go
yes,
with
sir.
yeah.
I'd be in a suit and tie. Whatever you say, Mr. O'Neill. Uh,
We do get
Daredevil,
some cool
it's
images here though once the
yeah.
Batmobile appears.
Well, I think that's a cool image of Daredevil overlooking Batman gliding down to the Batmobile. The couple of the quick four panels of Daredevil. I think that's great art from McDaniel. I really like that.
Hmm.
Shadow hitting him as he's thinking, and then the smirk on his face, and then him. That's almost like the Daredevil pose I kind of see is his leap. Like that's
Hmm.
just how in my head, a version of that is what I'd say right away. If somebody's like Daredevil, boom, that's what I'd see. Him jumping on the Batmobile. This is like interesting of Daredevil standing there, Batman plays chicken, and then just drives around him. Like, all right. Like, okay.
I really like that. I
You did
For
like that
some
a lot?
reason I
I don't
really
hate it.
like this part.
Let me see that. I don't hate it at all.
What I
Just like,
like about
okay.
it, I mean, yes, they're playing chicken. There's two very specific things that they're trying to push through here. A, they're pushing through Batman's rule because he's
Yeah.
not going to kill this guy.
Yes, which I applaud.
But and then B, Daredevil's a man without fear, so he's not going to move.
That's true.
Yeah, he's going to stand his ground. So, would this actually happen? Would Batman feign running down Daredevil? Probably not. But in the context of this story, I see what they were going for, and I dig it.
You're all right with it.
Yeah,
It's a cool way to get the Batmobile in, which do you like the Batmobile?
it's okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
I mean, it's not the best Batmobile I've ever seen. It looks kind of like a dune buggy a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and Batman looks very hunched up in it. It looks very small for this
That's true.
Batman.
Yeah.
But it's not bad. I don't dislike it.
Gotcha. Before McFarlane's license expires, he makes a Batmobile of this one. Would you get it?
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay. Yeah, I'm with you. I think from here on out, well, from here on out, the Two-Face Hyde stuff, all I can really keep in my head is just that Two-Face keeps feeding Hyde more of the pills. And
Yes.
I'm still not remembering what's the end goal here. Other than clearly Two-Face, which it seems like his end goal doesn't fit into his usual gimmicks and stuff either. He wants this brain circuit board so that he can sell it.
Yeah. So
Okay.
he's definitely testing these pills on Hyde. And so one very common element to all of these DC versus Marvel stories is one villain is going to screw the other in
Yeah.
the end to try to
Who
to try to
who would have guessed, Eric?
yeah to try to take all the glory or all the money or whatever their goal is. They're going to try to take it for themselves.
Yeah.
Again, I think they tried to do a little more with this one
Hmm.
and then kind of underexplained it. So clearly,
Gotcha.
Two Face was the one screwing Hyde in this story, but where the pills originally came from, or what specifically they do, other than driving Hyde crazy, and will eventually kill him. I don't know. Maybe the pills were part of this the neurotech chips. Maybe they were some type of nanotech that was supposed to build the chip or something like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, the explanation in the end is Hyde has this chip in his head, and
Yeah.
apparently the pills put it there, but it's not well explained.
Yeah. I we get another example of their evilness by hanging this woman.
Oh
And
yeah, that's
as it's not cool, I think it's done really, really well. The image of the woman hanging Batman up top and Daredevil
yeah,
on the ground. Like I just think that that's a really good image.
it's very striking. Yeah,
Uh-huh. The heroes like it's kind of broody, you know, and moody of like it's a murder scene and it's just I don't know, like hats off, tip of the cap all that to just like this image too. That's a good one. Which is always weird to say. This person's dead. That is a good image.
Yeah, and then I do really appreciate after that image when
Mhm.
Batman's bringing her down.
Yeah.
The he and Daredevil are discussing, things that they're noting and talking about the victim and kind of giving her, through detective work, giving her a history,
Yeah.
which I think that's part of that kind of brings them a little more together because it matters.
Hmm.
Like this person mattered,
Yep.
and the two of them agree on that. So it's,
Let's give her
I don't
back
know,
some
it's,
dignity in Batman. Already done.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And then Batman's detective skills, it at least we're still seeing them working together and they're each bringing something to help, their case.
Hmm.
And Daredevil even of like, I've seen enough. Sorry, I've seen enough excitement for one night. Help me in putting this to an end. What are the missing pieces? Because that's how he sounds in my head.
Yeah,
And Batman
gotcha.
Two-Face killed to steal a neural net processor prototype, a new computer chip modeled after the human brain. It's one of a kind and in the wrong hands, a crate of information age dynamite. Lays it all out there. They find one of Hyde's hairs.
Well, and
They're
then right there, he's explaining the prototype is grown with
mhm.
perception, a synthetic nutrient. So the synthetic nutrient is what these pills are that Two Face is feeding Hyde.
Do you find, because then Hyde and Two-Face end up in a coffee shop, do you find the one kid said he wants to make, let's see, after this horror show, Marty is willing to trade Pulp Fiction for Nick at Night sitcoms because he also mentions like Quentin Tarantino.
Hmm.
Are those kind of things distracting to you in any way? Because for the most part, up to this point, we don't have any kind of pop culture references, topical references, or anything like that. Do you like it when they stick completely in this world, or do you like it when there's references made to reality?
I've I'm someone that's not very bothered by like pop culture references or product placement
Yeah.
in movies, things like that. Like I hear people complain about it, and it's just not something I pay attention to or notice or that it bothers. When it's specific names like this, like Quentin Tarantino and Nick at Night, um, that feels to me like more of a flourish of things that the writer may
Hmm.
enjoy.
Yeah.
And then it's like we could have used just like this guy, this kid wants to be a filmmaker,
Mark
you know?
Frank.
Yeah.
Mark Frank films.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
who's
I don't
Mark
even know
Frank?
that we
He
need
doesn't exist.
yeah, I don't even know that we need a filmmaker. Like maybe
Yeah.
he just he wants to make aggressive films or something like that. I get what they're doing. They don't do it badly because he goes from Quentin Tarantino to Disney by the end of this exchange.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess I consider it a little bit distracting.
Um, I think so much less for me with product placement, unless
Hmm.
it is distractingly obvious. But for the most part, like it's less distracting having a Mountain Dew pop machine than a pop machine that says soda, or somebody's drinking a can of Mountain Dew and something, as opposed to them drinking a can of soda and that's all it says.
Yeah.
That the broad generic is much more distracting to me than a real name pop. But when it comes to specific of what you just said with Quentin yeah, I started like that to me is now more so than when I was younger too. I think of it stands out a little bit more, almost in a not even distracting, but just almost could have just been he wants to make movies.
Yeah.
Keep it going. He wants to be like Quentin Tarantino. He would trade in Pulp Fiction for blah blah blah. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody reading now could be like, well, it's like 30 something years ago. Also on the flip side, could get somebody to be like, what's Pulp Fiction? Then they find out what Pulp Fiction is, and it's like the gateway to Pulp Fiction was Daredevil Batman, eye for an eye.
Yeah.
Just like interesting small little thing. I'm like, oh, I'll make sure to ask this because I don't know. It's totally just depends on what you're watching, what you're reading, and how it's displayed in the end for me.
Yeah.
I could care, I could not care. One thing that's clever, and I forget which, well, not clever, the Looney Tunes um, nod, Easter egg, when he says, Gothamitis irritatingus. I forget
Yes.
where Two-Face puts that. That made me laugh. Now, that's one that I love because it's a total, I can just see that Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoon freeze when you see Roadrunner and it does one of those titles at the bottom and then moves on. That one worked for me. I loved it.
Yeah, because it's when Batman and Daredevil bust into the coffee shop to
Yeah, there
help
you go.
these people they've got hostage, and Hyde sees Batman and goes, "What the hell are you?" And Two Face, a rodent, Gothamitis irritatingus.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's funny. I like it. Um,
yeah,
I think like speeding forward, there's like that next page is a really cool, really good Batman image with him a little hunched in the cape drawn over him, a little Dracula-ish. Yeah, that's
yeah,
great. Really like that. Really dig the Daredevil crashing through the window image too. So it's like, let's go back to the art and how I said at the beginning, and I wasn't trying to knock him down because it's like this is almost opposite of my like the opening page criticism in that this is clear what's happening. These two characters look great.
yeah.
Love both of these panels.
And I think this is the first time in the comic that you see Daredevil's billy clubs,
Oh yeah.
which feels like a, you know, where's his clubs been? But yeah,
It
but
took you
yeah, I
37 pages to get to the clubs?
yeah, we got the batarangs on like page 3. Where
Yeah.
was the billy club? But
Just saying.
yeah,
He knew Batman first. Just saying.
I agree with you. Everything here, I mean, you know exactly what's going on. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's much more clear. When you get into the action, it clears up a lot more than the actual backstory.
Yeah. Yep. And these like this is a good confrontation, good battle. And as I think from what I remember, part of it, part of this crossover event is to also not have the hero of each company meet, but also have them at some point face off against the other one's villain. You know, like I'm
Yes,
thinking of the Batman Ninja Turtles movie and the comic book of like distinctly no, we have to see Batman fight Shredder at some point because
hmm
that's part of the point. Yes, Batman with Ninja Turtles together, we want to see that. We also want to see while we're here, have the Turtles fight Batman's rogues, have Batman fight Shredder. And
yes,
I think that you could probably attest, no, you can attest more so that that's also part of the formula for these crossovers.
for sure. Definitely
Yeah.
part of the formula. You see it in every single one.
So this is and Two-Face as a threat, he's a brawler. Hyde is a brawler. He's just bigger. But so I don't know how much different Batman it is for Batman and Daredevil fighting these other ones villains. It kind of feels probably the same, but still, you bought the ticket. This should be part of the show. So
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad it's
And
included.
for Batman, I mean, this is pretty similar to him fighting Bane. So
Sure, yeah, and that's honestly what I was thinking too.
not out of his
Um,
wheelhouse.
so wrap up the big moment with Two Face that brings a lot of this together, like the Daredevil history with Two Face.
Yeah, and that's the big crux of having these two face off while Batman fights Hyde.
Face off. Oh, Eric.
Ah, ha, ha, ha. Doo-doo. So you've got as they're fighting, as Daredevil and Two Face are fighting here, you've got that conversation, and you get Daredevil throwing back to the flashback, and he says, "You've got to balance it out, counselor,"
Mhm.
which is a throwback to what was said while they were on the Lady Justice statue as
Yeah.
kids. And it snaps something in Two Face to remember. And he says, "Your plan's gone to pieces. Another random death just adds to the imbalance. Rein it in. Control both sides by doing something right." And through this conversation, I mean, it goes on a little bit more, but he because Two-Face wants to use his coin. He's so conflicted. He's like, I've got to get my coin. I've got to, I've got to flip for this to see what I'm gonna do.
Hmm.
And Daredevil tells him, screw the coin. Let the man make the call. District Attorney Harvey Dent, who believed in special circumstance and embracing the greater good. And that's what lets the man take over briefly. And
Yeah.
he gives Daredevil this controller to the neuronet processor and tells him, this knocks out the chip. This is what you have to use. So basically, Daredevil, from his lawyer experience and his friendship with Harvey Dent as they were kids, using that past to get through to the man behind the monster.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Then Two-Face wraps it up. Don't make any mistake about me, Red. Anything that happened here tonight was simply the last of Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
I like that he says that. I really like how this wraps up with Daredevil and Two-Face because that's what keeps Two-Face being such a one to look forward to in Batman stories is that Harvey Dent's still there.
Mm-hmm.
He may be pushed way down, but he's still there. I
Yes.
don't know. Maybe if we got like a spurt, hey, this issue, it's all Two-Face. There's no Harvey Dent reference or nothing. It's just Two-Face doing Two-Face things. Hey, I'm all for a villain is being a villain just because he's a villain. Everyone, like, I'm fine with that at times. I don't know how much replay, like, how much you can keep going to that well with Two-Face. Just
Mm.
doing that. What
Yeah.
makes him strong as a character is that inner battle because that, like all things Batman, the best and what people like the most is the relatability. And I think that there's a lot of rich material with Two-Face because it is about, how what's inside matching the outside. Being split of acting this way, though you really want to act this way. That you can pull from forever, with
Yeah.
Two-Face. And so using that here, I think is a really good connection. I think it works really well to wrap up the story. It's a great link between Murdoch and Dent, and to bring it back to the earlier flashback, and the couple comments sprinkled the rest of the way by Daredevil just works. So I'm really glad that though it's a little mucky of what's the whole point of Two-Face and Hyde, blah blah blah, I think really sticks to landing by the end to where it leaves you with a good taste in your mouth, even though I have criticism of the story up to this point.
Yeah. Um, I completely agree, and I even love the little part that, I mean, once Daredevil gets this neural net controller,
Hmm.
he still needs Batman's help
Yeah.
because Daredevil, he doesn't know that there's a sequence you have to put this in with colors to get it to work.
Hmm.
And Two-Face tells them the color sequence, but of course, Daredevil's blind.
Yeah.
And Batman, without saying a word, understands what's going on and reaches in, let me help you. And he
Yeah.
puts the colors in himself because Daredevil can't see it.
So good point, bringing that like more emphasis on that because I think that is a great. Sometimes, Eric, I'm dumb.
Okay.
Sometimes I'm not completely dumb. And when I'm not completely dumb, I don't need, hey, let me go ahead and lay out every single exact thing for you and spell it out for you. Are you caught up? Let me go and explain it a little bit more for you. Like, no, we got it. Let's keep going. You're slowing down the story. And this is like such a great, subtle thing that Chichester isn't beating you over the head with, hey, remember? Because Daredevil's blind. So he doesn't know color. It's so quick and so small. And then what is it too? It's bring like the two heroes working together.
Hmm.
Like it gives you the fuzzy feeling. Yay, Batman and Daredevil are friends. And classic because Batman's my favorite. Well, of course, Batman's the best. And he's like, let me help. Ugh, fantastic. So quick, so
Yes.
small, but like that's a nice capper as well for the two heroes.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And so you've got the feel good of Dent rising to the surface there. You've got the feel good of Batman helping Daredevil, and the day is saved because they've
Hmm.
stopped Hyde. They've got him under control with this hypodermic controller thingy,
Yep.
and they're both brought to justice here at the end.
And what do we get at the end? We get a nice little gala that Matt Murdock attends because he has to, right? And with Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne's quite cold, but it's a nice exchange in how they each know who the other one is by
Yes.
the end here.
Hmm.
Because Bruce Wayne's a detective, pieces it all together, he knows. Murdoch has his senses step up to where it's an I mean it's funny to even say but like a familiar smell. But like he knows the scent of like this is Batman and then it's Bruce Wayne talking and it's like
Well, it's his heartbeat. He notices the
I thought it was
calm.
the scent.
Yeah, so
Okay.
he a heartbeat
Gotcha.
a tenth of a pulse off, a
Oh
breath
yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
and out in close to perfect tempo, a scent with just a trace of menace.
Okay, that's what I read. Okay.
So he does get a little bit of a scent, but mostly it's the heartbeat because that's how Murdoch can tell if someone's lying is because he listens to
So
heartbeats.
that's literal and I took it or no, not literal, that's metaphorically and I took it literally. I could smell Bruce Wayne. I knew it was Batman. So I'm gonna
Yeah,
go
and
back to
he's
sometimes I'm dumb.
but
I know
he's
that Old
never
Spice aftershave. That smells like Batman's.
yeah. But they make it a point here to that he's never heard a heartbeat like
Yeah.
Batman's. So steady and
Oh, I haven't either.
but that's how he recognizes him, and I think that's a cool touch. And again, you're highlighting both characters here, one's detective work and one's abilities.
I'll say that the last panel though is not the best image of Bruce Wayne and Matt Murdock. Bruce
No.
saying, "Don't come to Gotham, Murdock." Why, Mr. Wayne, are you daring me? Murdock looks like an evil villain. Bruce looks like a grumpy Gus. And that's your last page
Yes.
of the story.
Did you watch the Sand? I don't know. I don't think you've ever read the Sandman books. I know you and I have
No,
talked
I
about that.
started. I got like 5 issues in or something, and I'm like, either this isn't for me or I'm not in the right mood.
Did you watch the TV series?
Did not.
Okay. So at some point, just Google an image of the Corinthian
Okay.
from Sandman,
All
because
right.
this image,
Do that right now.
this is the Corinthian. This is not Matt Murdock.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it pops right up and sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I get what they were doing with this final page. They're setting up that we've got another one of these crossovers coming with Daredevil and Batman. We've got to set up a little, you know, tit for tat here.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I will
but
read today or tomorrow. I've got it ready.
yeah,
Never read that one either.
and then at some point in the future we may do this again.
Maybe. Hmm. But there
But
you have it.
yeah,
Okay.
I get what they were doing, but that art on that last page, I'm with you. I'm not a
Yeah.
fan.
And it's like, book ended by not my favorite art, but a lot of good stuff in the middle. Before I move on to some questions, do you have anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to?
I did just want to say, and you know, I'll probably get more into this in final thoughts, but I know that that we took a lot of umbrage with some things in the book, but I don't want it to sound like I dislike it, because I really enjoy this book.
Mhm.
It is definitely a product of what they were trying to do with the
Sure.
crossovers. So yes, there are some things that are tailored in a specific way, but overall, I really enjoy it.
Gotcha. All right, Eric, are you ready for some questions?
Sure.
Yes, you've got a question?
What was your favorite part of Daredevil, Batman, Eye for an Eye?
My favorite part, and it's probably pretty obvious by now, but it's the flashback to Murdoch and Harvey Dent and their history together.
Hmm.
I think it just foreshadows so much in the story. It's so obvious that it's almost silly that
Hmm.
you wouldn't think about Harvey Dent and Matt Murdock encountering each other. But yeah, I just think they do a really good job with that. And it's going back this time and reading for the second time, just it's very in depth. There's a lot of words in that section, but it's pretty interesting to read, knowing what both of these characters' futures have in store for them.
Nice. I think there's a couple things that I really like in this book, but maybe my favorite part is at the arcade place where Two-Face gives his monologue.
Mm.
I don't know what it is, but sometimes dialogue I think just sings, and I think that his dialogue, his perception, with just so much thinking on what playing arcade games. But I just really like it. Totally worked for
Yeah,
me.
I like that part too. I find it interesting that you and I both had a favorite part that did not involve Batman.
I know. I was thinking, I'm like, it's gonna sound really weird if he doesn't, if he picks Batman. And I'm like, oh no, my favorite part. But they both included Harvey Dent.
They did.
There we go. We found out something about ourselves today. How about favorite panel?
My favorite panel. I mean, this one's easy. It's Batman and Daredevil jumping off the roof together. I mean, it's
Yeah, that's your money
both
shot.
of them in the air. The only thing, if I could have gotten the billy clubs and the zip lines from Daredevil, like wrapped
Hmm.
around him and flying
Yeah.
off, that would have been perfect. But yeah, this is a great image.
Mine is, where did we go? Early on in the story, Batman behind Daredevil, stalking because he's that good. And it's like, haha, because you get no context and you're like, you're damn right, Batman would be sneaky enough. Daredevil couldn't even notice that he's there. Boom.
That's a good
Suck it,
choice.
Marvel. But no, I think that's my favorite panel. And then as we moved on in this story, like I said, that murder scene, which would be really weird to say that's my favorite. That's a great panel. The one of Batman, like with the pulling his best Dracula, that's a great panel. The one of Daredevil jumping through, that's a great panel. So there's good highlights throughout, but I think just I do representation of that panel is, we know Daredevil and Batman are supposed to be equal in this book, but let's be serious.
Yeah.
Lady Justice leans Batman.
Yes.
Would you like to see this adapted in animation?
I don't know. That's a hard one.
Ooh.
Because honestly, it's almost impossible. I mean, as
Yeah.
impossible as it is for them to get comics together. DC and Marvel, their animated divisions with Disney and Warner Brothers, it's probably never going to happen.
Yeah.
Would I like to though? I mean, yeah, maybe as a two part with the second story.
Hmm.
Maybe as yeah, two-part animated movie or part one, part two in shorts would be cool. But I'm not holding my breath.
I am with you on where this is a reality where, you get to decide, because this question is where you get to decide. Yes, I
Hmm.
would like to see this adapted in animation. I think in a way, like you just said, you make it the Batman Dare. Yeah, I'm not thinking of logistics. Okay, it is because we're beyond even just like movies now, or like physical discs. But I was gonna say, hey, it's a disc with two 45-minute parts. One is a story Batman Daredevil. One is a story or Daredevil Batman. One is done by Warner Brothers Animation. One is done by Marvel Animation. Uh, Same formula as with these comics. Yeah, and I totally dig it. This story can inspire it, or they lift heavily from it. I don't know. I'd watch it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would, and it
Gimme.
would be interesting because we don't get much Daredevil in animation. So
Yeah. And I think in the whole thing, which I appreciate, is the whole story is you know, in a great setting for the two of them, of like it's nighttime, there's shadow, it's murder investigation. It's like those would be great starting points for, yeah, an animated short or episode or something like that. It's not too cheesy that I'm like, but I want them to correct some things. It's like, no, it's dealt in a little bit more mature PG-13 manner. And yeah, I'd totally be down to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, what are your final thoughts of Daredevil Batman Eye for an Eye?
Yeah, so final thoughts. It's a story, if you've never read it, I do recommend it. I think it's really fun to see these two characters together. I think the total ride of getting to this is a weird one where I think the actual destination may be better than the journey.
Sure.
In this, it's one of those
Yeah.
flip side things. Um, Whereas, again, some of the story is a little confusing as to how it all comes about, and they kind of go from A to B without a lot of explanation at some points. But there's really fun character work between the two heroes. There's a lot of fun character work with Two-Face himself. I think Hyde definitely gets pushed to the background a little bit, other
Yeah.
than being just a menacing monster. You didn't know much about him going in. You really don't know much about him going out.
Agreed.
So he was definitely, and it's funny because this one was done by Marvel, but they didn't really give a lot of focus to their villain.
Yeah.
So overall, it's fun. It's a very fun story with some very awesome characters. So with that, I mean, at that point alone, I think it's worth a read.
Yep. I agree. Could be a little tough to track down, but if you can, I'd also say worth reading. And it's something I'll revisit in the future for sure. And just like, the art and writing, that there's some points where I'm like, huh. And then there are parts that I think I really like this. So I think it's kind of yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if you have the opportunity. Worth it. Because it's Daredevil season. And who knows, maybe Batman will pop up in the new series. He will not.
He will 100% will not.
Not a betting man. I'd bet everything that he will not. No, I can't say that. My money would be on him not showing up. There we go.
Yes.
Eric, thanks for coming back on the show. Thanks for bringing this one with you. And it motivated me to finally check this one out because I enjoy that when I get to read something that I've never read before.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's taken you down a little rabbit hole since we started discussing this, because you've bought a Daredevil omnibus and you're looking at some different stories.
I've had the Daredevil omnibus.
Oh, you did.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got it as a gift 5-6 years ago or something.
Nice.
And I've read some of it, haven't read all of it. But
cool.
It at least got more of a Daredevil conversation going, where I've been picking your brain on some things. So
yeah, and you've looked into some other Daredevil stories. So yeah.
I have.
Yeah, I feel very good about that.
I feel good about that.
I've warmed your cold Marvel heart to a little bit of Daredevil.
Excuse me, lukewarm Marvel heart. Thank you very much. Quite lukewarm. And that's the trade-off, is that you've talked to me about Daredevil, and I'm going to guide you on Ninja Turtles on where to start with that.
And I'm down for that journey.
All right, excellent. Why don't you go ahead and plug away anything and everything?
Yeah, so you can find me on my podcast, The Fire Rises, a Batman podcast that I do with Joe Fornerado. We do have an upcoming, or it's probably out at this point if you're listening now. We have a 20th anniversary episode all about Constantine, the Keanu Reeves movie. So that is our 98th episode. We do have 100 coming up, and we'll be talking about plans for that soon. But if you'd like to find us, you can. It's TFR Bat Pod on all the socials: Instagram, X, Facebook, Threads. So check us out and find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Excellent, because they're clearly going to be talking about The Long Halloween. As for the Batman Book Club, like I said at the very beginning, before the episode started, check out on X and Instagram at the Batman BC for the giveaway details and how you can enter. So yeah, follow those accounts. Just follow them. Also follow and subscribe to the Batman Book Club YouTube channel, where Pete and I are going to no man's land this year. If you want to support the show, the variety of ways you can do that. Like I said at the top, patreon.com/thebatmanbc, tpublic.com, and type in TBBC for the Batman Book Club. But if you want to support the show and you don't want to spend any money at all, that's 100% A-OK. Easiest, quickest, most impactful thing you can do to help this show that you're listening to right here is to rate and review it wherever you get your podcasts. So whether that's Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, go to the rate and review page and rate and review the show, because the more reviews the show gets, the more it helps spread the word. And as we all know, that word is panic. So for Joe Fornerado's boss, Eric Carter, I am Ryan Lauer. And until next time, remember.